The Sworn Sword by George R. Martin. Read to you by Mario Portillo. In an iron cage at the crossroads, two dead men were rotting in the summer sun. Egg stopped below to have a look at them. "Who do you think they were, sir?" His mule, Maester, grateful for the respite, began to crop the dry brown devil grass along the verges, heedless of the two huge wine casks on his back. "Robbers," Dunk said. Mounted atop Thunder, he was much closer to the dead men. Rapers, murderers. Dark circles stained his old green tunic under both arms. The sky was blue, and the sun was blazing hot, and he had sweated gallons since breaking camp this morning. Egg took off his wide-brimmed, floppy straw hat. Beneath, his head was bald and shiny. He used the hat to fan away the flies. There were hundreds crawling on the dead men, and more drifting lazily through the still, hot air. It must have been something bad for them to be left to die inside of a crow cage. Sometimes Egg could be as wise as any maester, but other times he was still a boy of 10. "There are lords and lords," Dunk said. "Some don't need much reason to put a man to death." The iron cage was barely big enough to hold one man, yet two had been forced inside it. They stood face to face, with their arms and legs in a tangle, and their backs against the hot black iron of the bars. One had tried to eat the other, gnawing at his neck and shoulder. The crows had been at both of them. When Dunk and Egg had come around the hill, the birds had risen like a black cloud, so thick that Maester spooked. "Whoever they were, they looked half-starved," Dunk said. "Skeletons and skin. And the skin is green and rotten. Might be they stole some bread, or poached a deer in some lord's wood." With the drought entering its second year, most lords had become less tolerant of poaching, and they hadn't been very tolerant to begin with. It could be they were in some outlaw band. At dusk, they'd heard a harper sing the day they hanged Black Robin. Ever since, Egg had been seeing gallant outlaws behind every bush. Dunk had met a few outlaws while squiring for the old man. He was in no hurry to meet any more. None of the ones he'd known had been especially gallant. He remembered one outlaw Sir Arlen had helped hang, who'd been fond of stealing rings. He would cut off a man's finger to get at them, but with women he preferred to bite. There were no songs about him that Dunk knew. Outlaws or poachers, makes no matter. Dead men make poor company. He walked Thunder slowly around the cage. The empty eyes seemed to follow him. One of the dead men had his head down and his mouth gaping open. "He has no tongue," Dunk observed. He supposed the crows might have eaten it. Crows always pecked a corpse's eyes out first, he had heard. But maybe the tongue went second, or maybe a lord had it torn out for something he had said. Dunk pushed his fingers through his mop of sun-streaked hair. The dead were beyond his help, and they had casks of wine to get to Standfast. "Which way did we come?" he asked, looking from one road to the other. "I'm turned around." "Standfast is that way, sir," Egg pointed. "That's for us, then. We could be back by evenfall, but not if we sit here all day counting flies." He touched Thunder with his heels and turned the big destrier towards the left-hand fork. Egg put his floppy hat back on and tugged sharply at Maester's lead. The mule left off cropping at the devil grass and came along without an argument for once. He's hot as well, Dunk thought, and those wine casks must be heavy. The summer sun had baked the road as hard as brick. Its ruts were deep enough to break a horse's leg, so Dunk was careful to keep Thunder to the higher ground between them. He had twisted his own ankle the day they left Dosk, walking in the black of night when it was cooler. A knight had to learn to live with aches and pains, the old man used to say. "Aye, lad, and with broken bones and scars. They're as much a part of knighthood as your swords and shields." If Thunder were to break a leg, though, well, a knight without a horse was no knight at all. Egg followed 5 yards behind him, with Maester in the wine casks. The boy was walking with one bare foot in a rut and one out, so he rose and fell with every step. His dagger was sheathed on one hip, his boots slung over his backpack, his ragged brown tunic rolled up and knotted round his waist. Beneath his wide-brimmed straw hat, his face was smudged and dirty, his eyes large and dark. He was 10, not quite 5 feet tall. Of late, he had been sprouting fast, though he had a long, long way to grow before he'd be catching up to Dunk. He looked just like the stable boy he wasn't, and not at all like who he really was. The dead men soon disappeared behind them, but Dunk found himself thinking about them all the same. The realm was full of lawless men these days. The drought showed no signs of ending, and small folk by the thousands had taken to the roads, looking for some place where the rains still fell. Lord Bloodraven had commanded them to return to their own lands and lords, but few obeyed. Many blamed Bloodraven and King Ares for the drought. It was a judgment from the gods, they said, for the kinslayer is accursed. If they were wise, though, they did not say it loudly. How many eyes does Lord Bloodraven have? Ran the riddle Egg had heard in Old Town. 1,000 eyes and 1. 6 years ago in King's Landing, Dunk had seen him with his own 2 eyes, as he rode a pale horse up the street of steel with 50 raven's teeth behind him. That was before King Ares had ascended to the Iron Throne and made him the Hand. But even so, he cut a striking figure, garbed in smoke and scarlet with Dark Sister on his hip. His pallid skin and bone-white hair made him look a living corpse. Across his cheek and chin spread a wine-stained birthmark that was supposed to resemble a red raven, though Dunk only saw an odd-shaped blotch of discolored skin. He stared so hard that Bloodraven felt it. The king's sorcerer had turned to study him as he went by. He had one eye, and that one red. The other was an empty socket, the gift Bittersteel had given him upon the Redgrass field. Yet it seemed to Dunk that both eyes had looked right through his skin down to his very soul. Despite the heat, the memory made him shiver. "Sir?" Egg called. "Are you unwell?" "No," said Dunk. "I'm as hot and thirsty as them." He pointed toward the field beyond the road, where rows of melons were shriveling on the vines. Along the verges, goats' heads and tufts of devilgrass still clung to life, but the crops were not faring near as well. Dunk knew just how the melons felt. Sir Arlen used to say that no Hedge Knight need to ever go thirsty, not so long as he has a helm to catch the rain in. Rainwater's the best drink there is, lad. The old man never saw a summer like this one, though. Dunk had left his helm at Standfast. It was too hot and heavy to wear, and there had been precious little rain to catch in it. What's a Hedge Knight to do when even the hedges are brown and parched and dying? Maybe when they reached the stream he'd have a soak. He smiled, thinking of how good that would feel, to jump right in and come up sopping wet and grinning, with water cascading down his cheeks and through his tangled hair, and his tunic clinging sodden to his skin. Egg might want a soak as well, though the boy looked cool and dry, more dusty than sweaty. He never sweated much. He liked the heat. In Dorne, he went about bare-chested, and turned brown as a Dornishman. It is his dragon blood, Dunk told himself. Whoever heard of a sweaty dragon? He would gladly have pulled his own tunic off, but it would not be fitting. A Hedge Knight could ride bare naked if he chose. He had no one to shame but himself. It was different when your sword was sworn. When you accept a lord's meat and mead, all you do reflects on him, Sir Arlen used to say. Always do more than he expects of you, never less. Never flinch at any task or hardship, and above all, never shame the lord you serve. At Standfast, meat and mead meant chicken and ale, but Sir Eustace ate the same plain fare himself. Dunk kept his tunic on and sweltered. Sir Bennis of the Brown Shield was waiting at the old plank bridge. "So you come back," he called out. "You were gone so long I thought you run off with the old man's silver." Bennis was sitting on his shaggy garron, chewing a wad of sourleaf that made it look as if his mouth was full of blood. "We had to go all the way to Dosk to find some wine," Dunk told him. "The Krakens raided Little Dosk. They carried off the wealth and women and burned half of what they did not take." "That Dagon Greyjoy wants for hangin'," Bennis said. "Aye, but who's to hang him? You see old Pinchbottom Pate?" "They told us he was dead. The Ironmen killed him when he tried to stop them taking off his daughter. 7 bloody hells." Bennis turned his head and spat. "I seen that daughter once. Not worth dying for, you ask me. That fool Pate owed me half his silver." The Brown Knight looked just as he had when they left. Worse, he smelled the same as well. He wore the same garb every day. Brown breeches, a shapeless rough-spun tunic, horsehide boots. When armored, he donned a loose brown surcoat over a shirt of rusted mail. His sword belt was a cord of boiled leather, and his seamed face might have been made of the same thing. His head looks like one of those shriveled melons that we passed. Even his teeth were brown, under the red stains left by the sour leaf he liked to chew. Amidst all that brownness, his eyes stood out. They were a pale green, squinty small, close-set, and shiny bright with malice. "Only 2 casks," he observed. "Sir Eustace wanted 4. "We were lucky to find 2, said Dunk. "The drought reached the arbor, too. We heard the grapes are turning into raisins on the vines, and the ironmen have been pirating." "Sir," Egg broke in, "the water's gone." Dunk had been so intent on Bennis that he hadn't noticed. Beneath the warped wooden planks of the bridge, only sand and stones remained. "That's queer. The stream was running low when we left, but it was running." Bennis laughed. He had 2 sorts of laughs. Sometimes he cackled like a chicken, and sometimes he brayed louder than Egg's mule. This was his chicken laugh. "Dried up while you was gone, I guess. A drought will do that." Dunk was dismayed. "Well, I won't be soaking now." He swung down to the ground. What's going to happen to the crops? Half the wells in the reach had gone dry, and all the rivers were running low, even the Blackwater Rush and the mighty Mander. "Nasty stuff, water," Bennis said. "Drank some once, and it made me sick as a dog. Wine's better." "Not for oats, not for barleycorn, not for carrots, onions, cabbages. Even grapes need water." Dunk shook his head. "How could it go dry so quick? We've only been gone 6 days." "Wasn't much water there to start, Dunk. Time was, I could piss me bigger streams than this one." "Not Dunk," said Dunk. "I told you that." He wondered why he bothered. Bennis was a mean-mouthed man, and it pleased him to make mock. "I am called Sir Duncan the Tall." "By who? Your bald pup?" He looked at Egg and laughed his chicken laugh. "You're taller than when you did for Pennytree, but you still look like a proper Dunk to me." Dunk rubbed the back of his neck and stared down at the rocks. "What should we do?" "Fetch home the wines, and tell Sir Eustace his stream's gone dry. The Standfast well still draws. He won't go thirsty. Don't call him useless." Dunk was fond of the old knight. "You sleep beneath his roof. Give him some respect." "You respect him enough for the both of us, Dunk," said Bennis. "I'll call him what I will." The silvery gray planks creaked heavily as Dunk walked onto the bridge, to frown down at the sand and stone below. A few small brown pools glistened among the rocks, he saw. None larger than his hand. Dead fish, there and there, see? The smell of them reminded him of the dead men at the crossroads. "I see them, sir," said Egg. Dunk hopped down to the stream bed, squatted on his heels, and turned over a stone. Dry and warm on top, moist and muddy underneath. The water can't have been gone long. Standing, he flicked the stone sidearm at the bank, where it crashed through a crumbling overhang in a puff of dry, brown earth. The soils cracked along the banks, but soft and muddy in the middle. Those fish were alive yesterday. "Dunk the Lunk," Pennytree used to call you, I recall. Sir Bennis spat a wad of sour leaf onto the rocks. It glistened red and slimy in the sunlight. "Lunk shouldn't try and think. Their heads is too bloody thick for such." Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall. From Sir Arlen, the words had been affectionate. He had been a kindly man, even in his scolding. In the mouth of Sir Bennis of the Brown Shield, they sounded different. "Sir Arlen's 2 years dead," Dunk said, "and I'm called Sir Duncan the Tall." He was sorely tempted to put his fist through the Brown Knight's face and smash those red and rotten teeth to splinters. Bennis of the Brown Shield might be a nasty piece of work, but Dunk had a good 1.5 feet on him. And 4 stone as well. He might be a lunk, but he was big. Sometimes it seemed as though he'd thumped his head on half the doors in Westeros, not to mention every beam in every inn from Dorne up to the neck. Egg's brother Aemon had measured him in Oldtown, and found he lacked an inch of 7 feet. But that was half a year ago. He might have grown since. Growing was the one thing Dunk did really well, the old man used to say. He went back to Thunder and mounted up again. "Egg, get on back to Standfast with the wine. I'm going to see what's happened to the water." "Streams dry up all the time," said Bennis. "I just want to have a look. Like how you looked under that rock? Shouldn't go turning over rocks, Lunk." "Never know what might crawl out. We got us nice straw pallets back at Standfast. There's eggs more days than not, and not much to do but listen to Sir Eustace go on about how great he used to be. Leave it be, I say. The stream went dry. That's all." Dunk was nothing if not stubborn. "Sir Eustace is waiting on his wine," he told Egg. "Tell him where I went." I will, sir. Egg gave a tug on Maester's lead. The mule twitched his ears, but started off again at once. He wants to get those wine casks off his back. Dunk could not blame him. The stream flowed north and east when it was flowing, so he turned Thunder south and east. He had not ridden a dozen yards before Bennis caught him. I best come see you don't get hanged. He pushed a fresh sour leaf into his mouth. Past that clump of sand willows, the whole right bank is Spiderland. I'll stay on our side. Dunk wanted no trouble with the Lady of the Cold Moat. At Standfast, you heard ill things of her. The Red Widow, she was called, for the husband she had put into the ground. Old Sam Stoop said she was a witch, a poisoner, and worse. 2 years ago, she had sent her knights across the stream to seize an Osgrey man for stealing sheep. When Milord rode to Coldmoat to demand him back, he was told to look for him at the bottom of the moat. Sam had said, she'd sewn poor Dake into a bag of rocks and sunk him. 'Twas after that Sir Eustace took Sir Bennis into service, to keep them spiders off his land. Thunder kept a slow, steady pace beneath the broiling sun. The sky was blue and hard, with no hint of cloud anywhere to be seen. The course of the stream meandered around rocky knolls and forlorn willows, through bare brown hills and fields of dead and dying grain. An hour upstream from the bridge, they found themselves riding on the edge of the small Osgrey forest called Watts Wood. The greenery looked inviting from afar, and filled Dunk's head with thoughts of shady glens and chuckling brooks. But when they reached the trees, they found them thin and scraggly, with drooping limbs. Some of the great oaks were shedding leaves, and half the pines had turned as brown as Sir Bennis, with rings of dead needles girdling their trunks. Worse and worse, thought Dunk. One spark, and this will all go up like tinder. For a moment, though, the tangled underbrush along the chucky water was still thick with thorny vines, nettles, and tangles of briar white and young willow. Rather than fight through it, they crossed the dry stream bed to the Coldmoat side, where the trees had been cleared away for pasture. Amongst the parched brown grasses and faded wildflowers, a few black-nosed sheep were grazing. Never knew an animal stupid as sheep, Sir Bennis commented. Think they're kin to you, Lunk? When Dunk did not reply, he laughed his chicken laugh again. Half a league farther south, they came upon the dam. It was not large as such things went, but it looked strong. 2 stout wooden barricades had been thrown across the stream from bank to bank, made from the trunks of trees with the bark still on. The space between them was filled with rocks and earth and packed down hard. Behind the dam, the flow was creeping up the banks and spilling off into a ditch that had been cut through Lady Weber's fields. Dunk stood in his stirrups for a better look. The glint of sun off water betrayed a score of lesser channels, running off in all directions like a spider's web. They are stealing our stream. The sight filled him with indignation, especially when it dawned on him that the trees must surely have been taken from Watts Wood. See what you went and did, Lunk, said Bennis. Couldn't have it if the stream dried up. No. Might be this starts with water, but it'll end with blood. Yours and mine, most like. The brown knight drew his sword. Well, no help for it now. There's your thrice damned diggers. Best we put some fear in 'em. He raked his garron with his spurs and galloped through the grass. Dunk had no choice but to follow. Sir Arlen's longsword rode his hip, a good straight piece of steel. If these ditch diggers have a lick of sense, they'll run. Thunder's hooves kicked up clods of dirt. One man dropped his shovel at the sight of the oncoming knights, but that was all. There was a score of diggers, short and tall, old and young, all baked brown by the sun. They formed a ragged line as Bennis slowed, clutching their spades and picks. This is Coldmoat land, one shouted. And that's an Osgrey stream, Bennis pointed with his longsword. Who put that damned dam up? Master Cedric made it, said one young digger. No, an elder man insisted. The grey pup pointed some and said do this and do that, but it were us who made it. Then you can bloody well unmake it. The digger's eyes were sullen and defiant. One wiped the sweat off his brow with the back of his hand. No one spoke. You lot don't hear so good, said Bennis. Do I need to lop me off a year or two? Who's first? This is Weberland. The old digger was a scrawny fellow, stooped and stubborn. You got no right to be here. Lop off any ears and milady will drown you in a sack. Bennis rode closer. "Don't see no ladies here, just some mouthy peasants." He poked the digger's bare brown chest with the point of his sword, just hard enough to draw a bead of blood. "He goes too far." "Put up your steel," Dunk warned him. "This is not his doing. This maester set them to the task." "It's for the crops, sir," a jug-eared digger said. "The wheat was dying," the maester said. "The pear trees, too." "Well, maybe them pear trees die, or maybe you do." "Your talk don't frighten us," said the old man. "No." Bennis made his longsword whistle, opening the old man's cheek from ear to jaw. "I said, them pear trees die, or you do." The digger's blood ran red down one side of his face. He should not have done that. Dunk had to swallow his rage. Bennis was on his side in this. "Get away from here," he shouted at the diggers. "Go back to your lady's castle." "Run," Sir Bennis urged. 3 of them let go of their tools and did just that, sprinting through the grasses. But another man, sunburned and brawny, hefted a pick and said, "There's only 2 of them." "Shovels against swords is a fool's fight, Jorgen," the old man said, holding his face. Blood trickled through his fingers. "This won't be the end of this. Don't think it will." "One more word, and I might be the end of you." "We meant no harm to you," Dunk said to the old man's bloody face. "All we want is our water. Tell your lady that." "Oh, we'll tell her, sir," promised the brawny man, still clutching his pick. "That we will." On the way home, they cut through the heart of Watts Wood, grateful for the small measure of shade provided by the trees. Even so, they were cooked. Supposedly, there were deer in the wood, but the only living things they saw were flies. They buzzed about Dunk's face as he rode, and crept round Thunder's eyes, irritating the big warhorse to no end. The air was still, suffocating. At least in Dorne, the nights were dry, and at night it grew so cold I shivered in my cloak. In the Reach, the nights were hardly cooler than the days, even this far north. When ducking down beneath an overhanging limb, Dunk plucked a leaf and crumpled it between his fingers. It fell apart like a 1,000-year-old parchment in his hand. "There was no need to cut that man," he told Bennis. "A tickle on his cheek was all it was, to teach him to mind his tongue. I should have cut his bloody throat for him. Only then the rest would have run like rabbits, and we'd have to ride down the lot of 'em." "You'd kill 20 men," Dunk said, incredulous. 22. That's more than all your fingers and all your toes, Lunk. You have to kill them all, else they go telling tales." They circled round a deadfall. "We should have told Sir Eustace the drought dried up his little pissant stream." "Sir Eustace." "You would have lied to him?" "Aye, and why not? Who's to tell him any different? The flies?" Bennis grinned a wet, red grin. "Sir Eustace never leaves the tower except to see the boys down in the blackberries. A sworn sword owes his lord the truth." "There's truths and truths, Lunk. Some don't serve." He spat. "The gods make droughts. A man can't do a bloody buggering thing about the gods. The Red Widow, though. We tell Eustace that bitch dog took his water. He'll feel honor-bound to take it back. Wait and see. He'll think he's got to do something." "He should. Our small folk need that water for their crops." "Our small folk?" Sir Bennis brayed his laughter. "Was I off having a squat when Sir Eustace made you his heir? How many small folk you figure you got? 10? And that's counting Squinty Jane's half-wit son that don't know which end of the axe to hold. Go make knights of every one of them, and we'll have half as many as the widow. And never mind her squires and her archers and the rest. You need both hands and both feet to count them all, and your bald-head boy's fingers and toes, too." "I don't need toes to count." Dunk was sick of the heat, the flies, and the Brown Knight's company. He may have ridden with Sir Arlen once, but that was years and years ago. The man has grown mean and false and craven. He put his heels into his horse and trotted on ahead, to put the smell behind him. Standfast was a castle only by courtesy. Though it stood bravely atop a rocky hill and could be seen for leagues around, it was no more than a tower house. A partial collapse a few centuries ago had required some rebuilding, so the north and west faces were pale gray stone above the windows and the old black stone below. Turrets had been added to the roofline during the repair, but only on the sides that were rebuilt. At the other two corners crouched ancient stone grotesques, so badly abraded by wind and weather that it was hard to say what they had been. The pine wood roof was flat, but badly warped and prone to leaks. A crooked path led from the foot of the hill up to the tower, so narrow it could only be ridden single file. Dunk led the way on the ascent, with Bennis just behind. He could see Egg above them, standing on a jut of a rock in his floppy straw hat. They reined up in front of the little daub and wattle stable that nestled at the tower's foot, half hidden under a misshapen heap of purple moss. The old man's grey gelding was in one of the stalls, next to Maester. Egg and Sam Stoops had gotten the wine inside, it seemed. Hens were wandering the yard. Egg trotted over. "Did you find what happened to the stream?" "The Red Widows dammed it up." Dunk dismounted and gave Thenter's reins to Egg. "Don't let him drink too much at once." "No, sir, I won't." "Boy," Bennis called, "you can take my horse as well." Egg gave him an insolent look. "I'm not your squire." That tongue of his will get him hurt one day, Dunk thought. "You'll take his horse, or you'll get a clout in the ear." Egg made a sullen face, but did as he was told. As he reached for the bridle, though, Sir Bennis hawked and spat. A glob of glistening red phlegm struck the boy between his two toes. He gave the brown knight an icy look. "You spit on my foot, sir." Bennis clambered to the ground. "Aye, next time I'll spit in your face. I'll have none of your bloody tongue." Dunk could see the anger in the boy's eyes. "Tend to the horses, Egg," he said before things got any worse. "We need to speak with Sir Eustace." The only entrance into Standfast was through an oaken iron door 20 feet above them. The bottom steps were blocks of smooth black stone, so worn they were bowl-shaped in the middle. Higher up, they gave way to a steep wooden stair that could be swung up like a drawbridge in times of trouble. Dunk shooed the hens aside and climbed 2 steps at a time. Standfast was bigger than it appeared. Its deep vaults and cellars occupied a good part of the hill on which it perched. Above ground, the tower boasted 4 stories. The upper 2 had windows and balconies. The lower 2 only arrow slits. It was cooler inside, but so dim that Dunk had to let his eyes adjust. Sam Stoops' wife was on her knees by the hearth, sweeping out the ashes. "Is Sir Eustace above or below?" Dunk asked her.
"Up, sir."
The old woman was so hunched that her head was lower than her shoulders.
"He just come back from visiting the boys down in the blackberries."
The boys were Eustace Osgrey's sons, Edwin, Harold, Adam. Edwin and Harold had been knights, Adam a young squire. They had died on the Redgrass field 15 years ago, at the end of the Blackfire Rebellion. They died good deaths, fighting bravely for the king, Sir Eustace told Dunk, and I brought them home and buried them among the blackberries. His wife was buried there as well. Whenever the old man breached a new cask of wine, he went down to the hill to pour each of his boys a libation. "To the king!" he would call out loudly, just before he drank. Sir Eustace's bedchambers occupied the 4th floor of the tower, with his sword just below. That was where he would be found, Dunk knew, puttering amongst the chests and barrels. The solar's thick grey walls were hung with rusted weaponry and captured banners, prizes from battles fought long centuries ago, and now remembered by no one but Sir Eustace. Half the banners were mildewed, and all were badly faded and covered with dust, their once bright colours gone to grey and green. Sir Eustace was scrubbing the dirt off a ruined shield with a rag when Dunk came up the steps. Bennis followed fragrant at his heels. The old knight's eyes seemed to brighten a little at the sight of Dunk. "My good giant," he declared, "and brave Sir Bennis, come have a look at this. I found it in the bottom of that chest. A treasure, though fearfully neglected. It was a shield, or what remained of one. That was little enough. Almost half of it had been hacked away, and the rest was grey and splintered. The iron rim was solid rust, and the wood was full of wormholes. A few flakes of paint still clung to it, but too few to suggest a sigil." "My lord," said Dunk. The Osgreys had not been lords for centuries, yet it pleased Sir Eustace to be styled so, echoing as it did the past glories of his house. "What is it?" "The little lion's shield." The old man rubbed at the rim, and some flakes of rust came off. "Sir Wilbert Osgrey bore this at the battle where he died. I'm sure you know the tale." No, my lord, said Bennis. We don't, as it happens. The little lion, did you say? What, was he a dwarf or some such? Certainly not. The old knight's moustache quivered. Sir Wilbert was a tall and powerful man, and a great knight. The name was given him in childhood, as the youngest of 5 brothers. In his day, there were still 7 kings in the 7 kingdoms, and Highgarden and the Rock were oft at war. The Green Kings ruled us then, the Gardeners. They were of the blood of the old Garth Greenhand, and a green hand upon a white field was their kingly banner. Giles III took his banners east to war against the Storm King, and Wilbert's brothers all went with him, for in those days the Chequy Lion always flew beside the Green Hand when the King of the Reach went forth to battle. Yet it happened that while King Giles was away, the King of the Rock saw his chance to tear a bite out of the Reach. So he gathered up a host of western men and came down upon us. The Osgreys were the marshals of the North March, so it fell to the little lion to meet them. It was the 4th King Lancel who led the Lannisters, it seemed to me, or mayhaps the 5th. Sir Wilbert blocked King Lancel's path, and bid him halt. "Come no further," he said. "You are not wanted here. I forbid you to set foot upon the Reach." But the Lannisters ordered all his banners forward. They fought for half a day, the Gold Lion and the Chequy. The Lannister was armed with a Valyrian sword that no common steel can match, so the little lion was hard-pressed, his shield in ruins. In the end, bleeding from a dozen grievous wounds, with his own blade broken in his hand, he threw himself headlong at his foe. King Lancel cut him near in half, the singers say, but as he died the little lion found the gap in the king's armor beneath his arm, and plunged his dagger home. When their king died, the Westermen turned back, and the Reach was saved. The old man stroked the broken shield as tenderly as if it had been a child. "Aye, my lord," Bennis croaked. "We could use a man like that today. Dunk and me had a look at your stream, my lord. Dry as a bone, and not from no drought." The old man set the shield aside. "Tell me." He took a seat and indicated they should do the same. As the brown knight launched into the tale, he sat listening intently, with his chin up and his shoulders back, as upright as a lance. In his youth, Sir Eustace Osgrey must have been the very picture of chivalry, tall and broad and handsome. Time and grief had worked their will on him, but he was still unbent, a big-boned, broad-shouldered, barrel-chested man with features as strong and sharp as some old eagle. His close-cropped hair had gone white as milk, but the thick moustache that hid his mouth remained an ashy gray. His eyebrows were the same color, the eyes beneath a paler shade of gray, and full of sadness. They seemed to grow sadder still when Bennis touched upon the dam. "That stream has been known as the Chequy Water for 1,000 years or more," the old knight said. "I caught a fish there as a boy, and my sons all did the same. Alisane liked to splash in the shallows on hot summer days like this." Alisane had been his daughter, who had perished in the spring. "It was on the banks of the Chequy Water that I kissed a girl for the first time. A cousin she was, my uncle's youngest daughter, of the Osgreys of Leafy Lake. They are all gone now, even her." His mustache quivered. "This cannot be borne, sirs. The woman will not have my water. She will not have my Chequy Water." "Dam's built strong, my lord," Bennis warned. "Too strong for me and Sir Dunk to pull down in an hour, even with the bald-head boy to help. We'll need ropes and picks and axes and a dozen men, and that's just for the work, not for the fighting." Sir Eustace stared at the little lion's shield. Dunk cleared his throat. "My lord, as to that, when we came upon the diggers, well—" "Dunk, don't trouble my lord with trifles," said Sir Bennis. "I taught one fool a lesson, that was all." Sir Eustace looked up sharply. "What sort of lesson?" "With my sword, as it were. A little claret on the cheek, that's all it were, my lord." The old knight looked long at him. That was ill-considered, sir. The woman has a spider's heart. She murdered 3 of her husbands, and all her brothers died in swaddling clothes. 5 there were, or 6 mayhaps, I don't recall. They stood between her and the castle. She would whip the skin off any peasant who displeased her, I do not doubt. But for you to cut one, no, she will not suffer such an insult. Make no mistake. She will come for you, as she came for Lem." "Dake, my lord," Sir Bennis said, "begging your lordly pardon. You knew him, and I never did. but his name were Dake. If it please my lord, I could go to Golden Grove and tell Lord Rowan of this dam, said Dunk. Rowan was the old knight's liege lord. The Red Widow held her lands of him as well. Rowan? No, look for no help there. Lord Rowan's sister wed Lord Wyman's cousin Wendell, so he is kin to the Red Widow. Besides, he loves me not. Sir Duncan, on the morrow you must make the rounds of all my villages and roust out every able-bodied man of fighting age. I am old, but I am not dead. The woman will soon find that the Checky lion still has claws. 2, Dunk thought glumly, and I am one of them.